Good evening. Welcome to another in our series of town hall meetings at Beth Israel, the West Temple on Triscuit Road in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm very honored this evening to have two special guests with us. Honorable Judge Goldberg to my far left and Cuyahoga County Councilwoman Ms. Simon, in between us. As we begin this event, please note that you can always send us a chat if you have additional questions. The purpose of these town halls is that sometimes to bring public officials into a more convenient setting and to have a discussion with them about the issues of the day. If we could start with you, Judge Goldberg, can we get just a short biography of your professional life, please?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank the congregants of the West Temple and Rabbi Enid Latter for inviting us to come. It's truly an honor and a privilege. I think I was here a year ago, or maybe in January of the beginning of this year. It's a little bit different now, not having people, and we just took off our masks because we're 6 feet away. But it truly is an honor and a privilege to be here. I have been a Cuyahoga County domestic relations judge almost 6 years already, which is very hard to believe. Prior to that, I attended Ohio State University. My junior year, I was at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. I took a year off and worked for the American Israel Public Affairs Committee in Washington, D.C. Went to Cleveland Marshall College of Law, and I was an assistant Cuyahoga County prosecutor for only 24 years. And I was on city council. I was an elected official for 12 years in University Heights. 4 of those years were the vice mayor. And again, I am presently a domestic relations court judge. I have been married to my husband David for 31 years. And we have 4 beautiful kids and 1 granddaughter who was born in Israel.
And Ms. Simon?
Thank you so much. It's also an honor to be here. It's nice to not be on Zoom, and that's become the normal, but I am honored to be here to talk about the issues of the day. But I currently serve as a county council person for District 11 in Cuyahoga County, and that encompasses 6 cities on the east side. Before that, I served as a city council member in the city of South Euclid for almost 12 years, and my day job also is that I'm also an attorney in private practice, and I practice civil law, primarily family law. Most of my spare time goes to philanthropy and nonprofit work. I started a humane society in South Euclid. When I got on the city council, I'm active in different venues, including the Cleveland Vegan Society and advocacy around those issues. So that's where I stand now and what I do.
So I always find that professional people at some point in their early career have a mix of ambition and opportunity. And somehow it comes together to create where you sit. In any order in which you both want to answer, what came first, ambition or opportunity?
I think for me, Peter, I was always ambitious. I knew at a very young age that I wanted to go to law school. I was very involved with B'nai B'rith Youth Organization as a kid, and I loved it. It gave us an opportunity to work. Actually, this shul was in the forefront of Soviet Jewry, and I was very engaged with that. And B'nai B'rith for me was a tremendous opportunity, whether it was summer camps or being involved with petition drives or being involved with political campaigns. And my freshman year at Ohio State University, I had the opportunity to work for then State Senator Lee Fisher. And I said this publicly before, I had a little bit of a crush on him. And I was his page or intern at the time, my freshman year. And I was just enamored by the process, the way he worked with constituents in the neighborhood. As Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local, and that always just resonated with me to try to make a difference for our community at the local level. And but I always thought going to law school would give me that opportunity My folks did not graduate from college. I was actually the first one in my family to graduate from college. My dad had to, came back from the war and worked in our family business on West 6th Street, Liberty Textile, and he wanted me to sell schmatas with him, and I did for a little bit until the late Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs Jones hired me in the prosecutor's office. But I always felt that being an elected official, you could really make a difference.
And you, Ms. Simon?
Thank you. It's interesting. I wouldn't describe the opportunity and the ambition quite like that. I would say for me, it was a passion to serve, and unbeknownst to me, I was an activist at a young age. I was very connected to the environment and watching what was happening even early on. And wanted to get involved with that. So every opportunity I had would be to advocate on behalf of the environment and give money, but at some point I realized I was again, like the judge, I was engaged in political activity. I learned that to make a big difference would be to really become an elected official, to make more things happen more effectively. So I moved into South Euclid as my first house after law school. And I always wanted to be a lawyer, and that made sense to go to law school, but there was always this activism in me to do more. And when I moved into South Euclid, the neighborhood in which I moved was riddled with some problems in the day. And, I decided to stay there and make a difference, and started a neighborhood group, grassroots organizations to actually make sure that the neighborhood could become safe, and it did. And I learned early on at that point that I'm not even an elected official, and it made such a huge difference in working with those elected at the time, and that's what really spurred me on to run for office back in South Euclid for that seat at City Council. And I started back in 1997 with that, and was able to get on the council and make a lot of changes, but opportunity did knock when the county transformed and changed from a county commissioner structure into the government now, our chartered government that was formed after a scandal at the county commissioners, and the people voted to form a charter government. And when I saw this, it really, really called to me that this is something that's amazing, to be able to be a part of a new government, to, be a founding woman, founding father, but to be a part of that. So I changed course and what I was planning to do. I had some hope of running for judge, but this really spoke to me, and I threw in my hat in the ring, and it was late, but I really felt this was right for me, and that opportunity came up, and no one could have ever envisioned that because the seat never existed, So,
Yes.
And that's how I came to be a county council person.
So when I was in law school, 1978, I think the number of women by a percentage was maybe 25%. And I have a friend of mine who serves at the law school now. It's probably 51, 49 women, or it could be even higher. What was the percentage when the two of you ran, if you can remember?
It was, I don't know if it was 50% at that time. It was probably a little bit higher than what the figures that you're quoting,
Yeah.
but clearly you have more women now on the bench at the federal and state level, county level. It's definitely, you have more women at the law firms. I don't know in terms of, I don't know, this is anecdotal in terms of partnership tracks, but you certainly, women are in the forefront in the legal community today, no question about it.
And Ms. Simon, do you remember?
It was close to 50%, but below 50%.
Yeah.
It is starting to shift.
So thinking back as you began your legal careers, both of you, was being a woman a hurdle, or did it create maybe an easier roadblock? Was there a roadblock? Was it a hurdle? Or was it nothing at all, just I'm good at what I do, I'm a smart, intelligent person, and I'm ready to go?
I can say the latter. I always just knew this is something that I could do well, and just jumped right in. I got a job at a law firm, and I think perhaps it was a timing of the shift of accepting women as professionals in the legal community that gave that opportunity to step in and work my way up.
So I'm going to quote Oprah Winfrey if I can, okay? It's one of my favorite quotes, Peter. So she said, your calling isn't something that somebody can tell you about. It's what you feel. It's part of your life force. It's the thing that gives you juice, the thing that you are supposed to do, and nobody can tell you what that is. You know it inside yourself. And I think, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Sunny, but you know, both of us are very passionate about what we do. I don't think, you know, for whatever we do, whether it was me in the prosecutor's office or Sunny now in private practice or being an elected official, I've always seen this as not a 9-to-5 job. It's a mission, and I really believe that. It's a mission and it's a passion. You know, listen, I didn't have the political connections that other people had. You know, I always joke around that, you know, I was thinking about changing my name to like Mick Goldberg or Old Goldberg in deference to some of my very good friends that were in the prosecutor's office. You know, I didn't have those relationships, or my parents didn't, of blessed memory, that could make a call to this one or make a call to that one and say, hey, can you help her get a job? Can you help Frankie get a job? I really knew that if I wanted something bad enough, with the last name of Goldberg, I needed to work hard. And that's your track record. That's, you know, who you are, your integrity, your loyalty, your hard work, your work ethic. And I actually really always wanted to go into litigation and be a trial lawyer. And I pretty much stalked Stephanie Tubbs-Jones. I went to Case Western Reserve. She was speaking there. I heard her at Marshall. I heard her at a political event because I knew that that office really cultivated some of the best legal minds, best litigators, judges, elected officials. That was a place, and the other thing too that I think, Peter, is so important is relationship building in this profession. Whatever you're doing, whether you're in trial work or private practice or you're an elected official, and I felt that that office would just be an entree to those relationships and to be the best trial lawyer that I could possibly be. So a lot of it is being tenacious. And when
Her middle name.
Right. And when you want something bad enough and you think you can make a difference, you really have to put yourself out there and go for something, and it's really the truth.
Well, I know from all of my years of practicing law, and I'm sure that both the two of you agree with me, our number one asset is our word. Integrity is the most important thing any public official could possibly have, because there is this 5-letter word called trust, that you gain trust. It doesn't just happen. And we're going to talk about this in a little while, but it is interesting how you mentioned a couple times your last name. It is a fact that in this county, we have a river going through the middle of downtown, and a great majority of the Jewish population is east of the river through Solon and the southeast corner, whereas on the western side, there, I'm just going to guess, is 10% as many. We are the only synagogue located in the city of Cleveland. We're the only synagogue all the way to Elyria and all the way to Lorraine. The reason I make that introduction is there was a woman named Ginsburg who just passed. As a matter of fact, she passed for us on the morning of Rosh Hashanah. Or was it maybe the Eve? I can't remember. Eve. Can you two speak to whether she was someone important in your life and how she factored in all the work you've done?
So, because I spoke to some students that were at Marshall recently, and it was right after she had passed away, so I had something prepared. Because, you know, as a sitting judge, for me, she was extraordinary. She was an incredible, you know, role model, an incredible global icon. And I went, on Sunday night, I went, she died, I believe, on Friday night, Rosh Hashanah, and I started, I went to the Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court website, and I read all of her fellow justices, what they wrote about her, and it was, there wasn't any of the toxicity, and none of the politics. It was about who she was as a justice, and who she was as a friend, and as a mentor and role model to so many of us. So I want to just share with you, if I can, Peter, there was a statement made by Justice Stephen Breyer, who was nominated by President Clinton in May of 1994.
Sure.
And this is on the website, and I would tell anyone that's listening to really read those statements about her, because these were fellow jurists that worked with her, that really knew her. So he wrote, I heard of Ruth's death while I was reciting the mourner's Kaddish at the Rosh Hashanah service. I thought, a great justice, a woman of valor, a rock of righteousness, and my good friend. The world is a better place for her having lived in it. And so is her family, her friends, the legal community, and the nation. And I cried. I mean, you were reading what this woman did, for the legal profession, but for our community and for so many diverse sectors of our community. There was also something that I shared with the students at Marshall when she was asked to speak at the American Jewish Committee and to supply a statement on how her heritage as a Jew and her occupation as a judge fit together. And I'm going to quote her. She said, "I am a judge, born, raised, and proud of being a Jew. The demand for justice, for peace, and for enlightenment runs through the entirety of Jewish history and Jewish tradition. I hope in all the years I have the good fortune to continue serving on the bench of the Supreme Court of the United States, I will have the strength and courage to remain steadfast in the service of that demand." And listen, there was no one like her. She also said, "For the things that you care about, do it in a way that will lead others to join you." And what a powerful statement for all of us to live
Yes.
by and to learn.
Ms. Simon?
Thank you, Peter. I don't have any remarks written out, to prepare, but I can tell you that Justice Ginsburg was quite a role model for me, not so much in the legal avenue, but with regard to being a pioneer and having that commitment to justice and to go forward despite the odds, because that was her life. It was a hurdle for her. I mean, she had everything going for her except, to be the first, basically. And she kept pushing on. And for me, I can tell you that it manifested a little bit with my legislation. I just passed a plastic bag ban, to address the plastic pollution that's permeating our Great Lakes and particularly Lake Erie, and how that's going to impact our future with our oceans imploding. And we know that if we keep on the trajectory we're going to have more plastic in the ocean by weight than fish. So in my position, I was able to craft legislation and nobody was on board. In fact, when I started this, I was getting so much negative impact that most people probably just would have went home in a corner and cried. But I knew how important this was and kept pushing. And to have that role model, just be able to illustrate that if you keep going and you believe in something, that actually you can open up those doors and have people come on and support and understand. So that's, for me, what she represented outside of the legal realm. But there's no separation, really. The law, elected officials' job as legislators, they come together. And for me, there'll not be anybody like her, but she'll be hopefully not the last.
Move your mics down the other side of you, I think.
Oh, did you hear?
Okay, did you hear us or no?
Because everybody was talking this way.
Oh.
We're looking at Peter.
So,
Keep going.
I just
But
want to,
Peter, certainly, I
ahead.
mean, in terms of talking about the late justice, that legacy of equality and empathy and justice. I mean, this was a woman that I think when she went to Harvard, there were 9 women out of 500. And I think when the movie that I saw, I think that there were stories that the dean said, why should this place go to you and not a man? and to not be offered jobs when she graduated from law school. And the kinds of the dedicated work ethic that she had in terms of fighting for the most vulnerable, men and women. What a trailblazer for us to really emulate on a personal and a professional level.
So, Ms. Simon, when you think back from, let's say, I'm going to go to law school, to the amazing career that you've already had, how much of that time is spent on, boy, I am right on the path? And how much of that is, oh my gosh, there's a roadblock. I got to get around the roadblock. Okay, I'm back on the path. Because people are watching here, we have young people watching, who may be thinking, well, I'm just going to go to law school and become a judge. Or I'm just going to go to law school and I'm going to come on council, and this is going to be easy. Can you explain, from all of your years of experience, how there might just be a trough now and then, and how you found the strength to say, that's where I want to go and get there?
Yeah, so I just talked to a group of young women. I was part of a panel for Hathaway Brown, and you know, that's really important for the listeners to understand that, you know, when you do have your eye on the ball, and for me, I always had to keep that in center no matter what the obstacles, which always arose. And at first it was, you know, you feel defeat, you feel like I can't get beyond this. I felt like that. But as time went by in my career of just really not saying, no, I'm going to keep going. This is too important just to be shut down, and maybe the time isn't right this minute, but it's going to be right. And I just have to keep on it and start to coalesce with coalitions and build support slowly. And now I've learned that, and it comes with the experience and some wisdom that even though there might be an obstacle in a path, that, you know, there's ways to get around that if it's really important, and these things happen, important to me just to pursue and learn how to get beyond it. And that's part of just moving forward. And the bag legislation was, you know, I've had every obstacle in the world. I've had the state preempt me. I've had, you know, lobby groups and everybody, you know, really a force to be reckoned with. And it, you know, I did feel defeated for a minute, but you know what, it's too important. I'm not gonna be shut down. And it was just quietly building up a plan and to pursue it. And, you know, I've applied that now to other areas of my life and different legislation that I want to pursue, and just learn that, you know, it's the tenacity, it's the vision, it's the commitment and the passion, and I think it's the passion. So whoever's listening, if you have a passion and you want to get something done, don't be knocked down. Just know that, you know, that minute might not be the right time, but if you keep pursuing it, it will work.
And I assume that having gone through a difficult period of legislation, you've also learned how to meander through other pieces of legislation, maybe with a little bit more confidence in what you're doing. Is that fair?
It's totally fair. I mean, it's just really learning. This is, you know, a profession where there's learning, and you don't just jump in and become elected and make things happen. It is an intricate, oftentimes complex field to get things done, and it is the experience of learning how to get legislation passed. And it's not, you can't do it alone, and it's the bridge building, it's a networking, it's really building confidence, and your word is what you said, Peter,
Yes.
about having integrity and having those relationships where people trust each other, that we know we can you know, do this with support. And it's really gaining that support and trust. In my case now, it's my state legislators that represent the district, it's the mayors, it's the city council, it's all of that coming together, and the residents, the voters.
And Judge, talk about the impediments that may have gotten in the way of you finding your ambition.
Well, first, I would say that it's so important to find some mentors.
Yep.
You know, I've got pictures of individuals in my chambers, whether it was my, you know, former bosses, whether it was Albert Ratner, who's a tremendous, really role model for me. You know, something that you really want, you got to fight for it sometimes. And you know, Stephanie Tubbs Jones was really a tremendous mentor for me. You know, at the time, you know, when I was starting in the prosecutor's office, there really were not a lot of female elected officials to talk to and say, hey, what do you think of this? Can I do this? You know, there wasn't this group of women, Jewish women, that were, you know, pushing you to run for office or start a path that way. And Stephanie had said to me, you know, you really should start locally and run for city council in University Heights. And I think that's you know, start with your base. Start with the people that know you. And, you know, there were a number of people that ran for city council. There were 75 streets in University Heights, and I walked each street probably 3 times. You know, Sonny and I have both worn out a number of shoes, some you know, shoe leather. But people can sense if you're passionate about something and you really want to give back and you really care. And this was something that I really wanted to do. So I wanted to, you know, again, you can't say, hey, I want to run for that and then not kind of pay your dues. And I think you have to do that. And that's how you build those relationships. That's the one thing I think the late Congresswoman really taught me, was building different relationships, whether, you know, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's the community with the churches in Cleveland, whether it's, you know, again, safety forces, defense attorneys, you know, all of the wonderful fabric of our community. And you build on those relationships so people do trust you.
Yes.
And, you know, clearly there, you know, again, there were challenges for me. There were 2 judicial appointments that I was very close to getting under Governor Strickland, and I didn't get them, and for whatever reason. So you got to look yourself in the mirror and say, you know what, I'm not going to try to get an appointment, I'm going to try to run.
Yes.
And that's what you have to do. And, you know, and I think I was telling you, Peter, you know, in terms of, there's 59 Cuyahoga County judges, and I think this is correct, because it's from last year. So there's 2 in probate, 12 in the 8th District Court of Appeals, 34 common pleas judges, 5 domestic relations courts, 6 juvenile court. So I think this is right. There are 7 Gallaghers, 5 Russos, 3 Corrigans, 2 Satulas, there's 1 Goldberg. And, you know, I always say that, and when I speak, you know, whether it was 6 years ago when I first started on the bench, that the judgeship doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the families of Cuyahoga County. And it's really that belief and that balance between family and your job and being able to bring all of your life experiences. But it's, you know, running in Cuyahoga County, you know, there are 59 communities. And, you know, whether it's Strongsville and Westlake and Lakewood and Cleveland and Solon and, you know, Shaker Heights. So we have this wonderful tapestry in Cuyahoga County. And you really have to, you know, I kind of sometimes like campaigning too much pre-pandemic, because there is such a wonderful engagement in our community that people should know who I am and what I'm about and what I bring to the bench, because I really am, you know, you're representing Cuyahoga County, but I think, you know, having faith and fortitude and being tenacious and passionate, you know, all of those things, but you don't get elected in a bubble. You really, you know, between your family and your friends and people that believe in you, you cannot do this alone. You need the help and the support of a lot of people. And you also, the reality too is you have to raise, you know, the financial resources to run a county-wide campaign. And whether you're running locally in a city council or whether you're running county-wide or statewide or nationally, the reality is you have to raise money to get the word out with these elections.
You know, I can tell a personal story for a moment. There was a municipal judge named Christopher Boyko, who I've known for 35 plus years now, 1984, 36 years. And Boyko had never lost an election in Parma, ever. His father was law director for 25 years, and Boyko had never lost. and he lost a municipal court race to someone who had never run for office before. And I went and saw him the next day, and I said, you know, Chris, people are going to watch how you bounce. They're going to watch you immediately when you walk out this door. Are you going to be able to handle this like an adult, or are you going to have your head down? And as you two know, Christopher bounced back very well. Common pleas judge, federal bench.
Right.
And I'll never forget my conversations with him. You know, I mean, he was distraught. A Boyko had never lost. And we talked about it that next morning, how let's figure out what went wrong and let's immediately start working on what went right.
Right, so I'll share with you, in 2012, I ran for juvenile court in Cuyahoga County. And I actually beat the incumbent and another individual in a primary that was a nail biter. And in the general election, just to give you an idea, I lost by a very small percentage. But why I'm highlighting that, not only of, getting, dusting yourself off and,
Right.
going back into the ring.
Right.
What I do want to emphasize is for people that are listening, for anyone to tell your family and friends, for people to vote down the ballot. So in my race, just to give you an idea, in 2012, President Obama and Mitt Romney were running against each other for president. It's very glamorous to vote on top of the ticket, okay? And voting is so important, as we know. And there, in Cuyahoga County, there were 650,000 voters that voted on top of the ticket. And in my particular race, of those voters, 241,000 voters did not vote in my race for juvenile court.
Wow.
And I lost the race by like less than 1%. So it was like 5,000, 6,000, 4,000, I don't know, whatever that, it was a very, very small percentage.
Wow.
And that's why it's so important to become knowledgeable and to not get tired when you're going down the ballot, because really judges, and I named all the divisions in common pleas or in probate court and domestic relations court where I am, you're talking about judges that impact quality of life issues, in terms of life, liberty, and property that can be taken away. And it's so important we get, we all get caught up in what's going on nationally and what's on top of the ticket. But the impact that judges in Cuyahoga County or in any community that someone lives in on the municipal level is so important to become educated, whether it's from Judge for Yourself or the Ohio Supreme Court has sites, or looking at endorsements or whatever that is, to really know who you're in front of. I mean, listen, a lot of people have never been in a courtroom before.
Right.
And it's scary. I mean, as an assistant county prosecutor for 24 years and being a judge now for 6 years, it's like, that's my office. That's where we go, and that's where we work, and that's where you're talking to, the juries and domestic relations court. There are no juries. And now with, COVID, it's a whole different world with, Zoom hearings and everything. But it's becoming educated and engaged and really knowing who we're voting for.
Yes.
Whether that's going in person or absentee, where you could really do some of that research. It's so important to vote down the ballot.
So Peter,
Go
can I
ahead.
just,
Of course.
So the original discussion started with Judge Boyko, and I can say that for many of us as elected officials, judges, council people, legislators, we probably had a time where we lost.
Yes.
And my first race was in 1997. That was in South Euclid in a ward. And it happened that one of my colleagues who was running for that seat, I was supporting her, and she ended up getting moved because of an opportunity to a different race. And I thought, well, I'm going to jump in. And I was young, and I was somewhat idealistic, and I'm like, I'm going to run in this ward, and why not? My colleague had all the support of the particular party. I got in the race, and all of a sudden everybody just is like, oh no, not you, we're not supporting you, we only, we can't do this. And I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do it anyways. And I felt horrified, but I was already in, I was walking, I was going door to door. I decided I'm going to walk this entire ward, and I'm going to give it my best. Well, I did fairly well because I lost. It was against a longtime incumbent. And because of the numbers weren't so atrocious, you know, people started to pay attention that, you know, here's somebody who really stepped up. But what happened was, you know, there was a seat that opened up and there was an opportunity for an appointment. And I'm like, okay, I was out. Once I lost, I felt really bad. I'm not going to do this again. But when that appointment opened up, I got some calls and they're like, why don't you try? And I'm like, you know what, I'm going to try. And because I wasn't negative, I think this is really important.
Yes.
When I ran against that longtime incumbent in the ward, I just talked about what I'm going to do. I talked about, you know, what I believed in, how important it was for a young lawyer moving into the neighborhood to really make sure this is a safe place I want to live, and people really resonated with that message. You know, here's this new person coming in and wants to see these changes, and I was never negative. It wasn't about what, you know, Joe wasn't doing or, you know, anything about him. But that mattered because when it came time for the appointment, it was an at-large seat. And here's this Joe, the ward guy who beat me, who I lost to, was sitting there, and he was going to vote whether I should be appointed. And he did vote for me. And he told me later, he said, you were quite, you know, just professional and, you know, just respectful during that race. And for him, that mattered, and the people sitting at that table,
Yes.
that mattered. And so I think it's important to remember you can run a political race. There's no need to get down and dirty and, you know, just act like that, because it's really, it's above that. I think it's really about what you can bring, and to stay, you know, when they go low, we go high. And that was a lesson that I learned early on, and I think that's important because I was defeated, and but, you know, I held my head up and ran a clean race, and here I am, and I think that led me here.
It does seem that, well, opportunity may just not knock at your door every time. It's attitude that helps, and it's the way you express yourself that helps. Because as you just mentioned, people do take notice of the ability to communicate in an honest way about something you truly care for. And the both of you are obviously examples of that. And what happens is that you become a magnet, and people don't forget. They were, you know, there was this person, whether it was a woman or a man or a white or a black or an Asian or Latino, there was a person who I believed in. And if you can create that in somebody's mind, they usually don't forget it, right? And so when you both knocked on doors running for council, you know, you think, hello, how are you? Sorry to interrupt your dinner, but I'd like to get your vote, right? But I remember a year ago, there was a young man in Lakewood in our ward who had never run before. And boy, he came to the door and he was the nicest gentleman and he was professional and kind of thought, I said, give me your card and you could put a sign on my front lawn. And when the other person came by, I thought, well, that person had didn't have it in him, was just doing it maybe because somebody pushed him to it or whatever. There is a difference, isn't there? When you truly believe in what you're doing and you want to be in the public and you're ready for being in the public eye, and you two know that. Not everybody who thinks they want to be in the public eye are ready for it. But it is impressive that the both of you stood your ground, knew where your target was, and got there. And you're to be congratulated for all the effort that you know you put into getting there. Now we're going to talk about how you stay there, but it is quite an accomplishment to just say, I knew where I wanted to go, and I got there. That's a wonderful accomplishment for both of you.
Thank you.
But I also think, Peter, that when there are some failures,
Yes.
which happens, and
Yes.
you scrape some knees a little bit, you become much stronger. It takes, there's a lot of humility in that.
Yes.
And the other thing, too, that I think permeates for both Sonny and I is the quality of trying to be grateful and the gratitude. I think, I pinch myself when I go into that old courthouse and it's 107 years old and we say Pledge of Allegiance every morning. That this is really, this is a tremendous honor.
Yes.
And a privilege to really, wear a robe and to preside over, issues that are in front of me that involve families and children, and that, I always like to bring in interns or bring students in for the day, whether, whatever students, and I always, I'm involved with, mock trial competitions through in the 3 Rs, through the Bar Association. You know, I would teach in Collinwood. And I just think it's important that they see that process and how
Yes.
important it is in this country.
Yes.
And that they get to meet a judge and, hey, do you want to hang out with me for a day? Or do you want to, I've had a number of interns in the summer. And, to have that experience, I mean, when a gentleman by the name of Alan Krause took me, when he was a public defender, to the Justice Center, and I was in college, I was like, this is what I want to do. And those types of opportunities and experiences, for me to give back to young people, and for them to, because I think the legal profession is the best. Whether you're even going to practice or not, it's tremendous. I can't tell you, whether you're going into business or real estate or whatever you're doing, to have that background, because you have the relationships, whether it's with the professors or with your fellow students or whatever there is. And I can't think of doing anything else.
Well,
But to provide those opportunities to young people, to me is so, I can't imagine doing anything else.
so let's change the subject for a few minutes. I'd like to start with you, Ms. Simon. Tell us what a Cuyahoga County councilperson does. How often let's go, I got a bunch of different questions, but let's start with the idea of how often do you meet?
Well, before the, pandemic, we were meeting in person several times a week. We do a lot of work in committees, so I serve on several committees, and we met, Monday through Wednesday. And we also have council meetings every other week, and it's more than just it's a part-time job, but it's really not a part-time job. So the council work itself is demanding, but also there's responsibility to the cities I represent and showing up at those council meetings that I, as a council person, believe. Your question is, what do we do? So it's like any legislator, there's an executive, it's Armin Budish, and then there's the council, and we actually oversee the budget as our primary function. And so we allocate money and do those things, but we also have to be stewards of our communities, I believe. So I go to those meetings to see what the communities need.
And how
Those are
many-
my residents,
Yeah, and how many council members are there?
There's 11 of us, and there's 11 districts throughout the county. It was carved out after the new government formed.
And was that done by a population grade?
Yes.
To try to give each 11 a fair number of the same number of people?
We all have about 100,000 residents is our population.
And what cities do you represent, so-called represent?
So South Euclid, Lyndhurst, Beechwood, Highland Heights, and the city of Euclid and Richmond Heights. So it's east side, and it's diverse, it's wonderful. I've got the best district, I believe, in the county, with the county airport. It's an amazing, the lake in the city of Euclid, that a best-known secret that exists. And what I'd like to try to do is to bring this District 11 together. So, people who live in Beechwood have never been to Euclid, come to the lake, come to the pier that was just built. So it's building community, but on a larger scale. And so it's a multifaceted job. You govern, and then there's the politicking, and it's the grassroots work to do my job at that level.
And when were you first elected?
So 2010 was the first election for the new council people.
And it's a 4-year term.
It is.
So your term will be up in November from now, 14 months from now, or 13 months from now?
I think 2 years, yeah.
Oh, 2 more years to
Yep,
go.
We're
Okay.
4-year terms.
And do you know how many Jewish representatives of the 11 that there might be?
Oh, right now, I'm it, so.
You're it.
I'm it.
Wow.
There was Dave
One judge,
Greenspan.
one council member.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, and of course, the executive, Budish, is Jewish.
Yes.
So that's wonderful. That we finally have that happening at the county level, because usually, their first executive was Ed Fitzgerald, and, so it was the Irish tone, but it shifted, and it feels really different.
And how many of the 11 are women?
5.
Oh, that's very close.
So that, yep.
Okay. Judge,
Yes.
I know from personal experience that all 5 of the DR judges are females.
Yes.
Tell everybody the general scope of what your job covers law-wise.
Okay, so domestic relations court is family court. So it's essentially We handle divorces, dissolutions, legal separations, anything, pending that involves child custody issues, property division. We have a unit that's domestic violence where we have magistrates that handle those domestic violence civil protection orders, where as a judge I have to sign off on some of those cases. We probably have roughly on average between 400 and 450 cases on our docket. So I have, like, during the pendency of divorces, issues that come up, and then post-decree, where we have cases and we have magistrates that work for us as well that handle everything that happens after. There might be issues that come up after the divorce is finalized, whether it's a modification of support or a relocation issue, but anything in terms of financial issues, child support, spousal support, property division. We have families that are in crisis, and sometimes we have to refer them. We have a family evaluation service. We appoint guardians to cases in terms of what's in the best interests of our children. So I always say, I'll hold up, if I have 450 pending cases on my docket, I have a practice where I meet with the families at the first pretrial. I'll meet with the attorneys and the families to a court case. And I do this even now with Zoom hearings, because I never, ever want families to meet their judge, to meet me at the final hearing, ever. There's a quote from To Kill a Mockingbird, which I kind of always kind of think about during all of my cases. And Atticus Finch tells Scout, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb in his skin and walk around in it." And I think about that quite often, because every family that comes before me has a different narrative. Every family has a different situation. And I have to tell you, Peter, it is very painful right now, especially now. First of all, any family going through a divorce, they're in crisis mode.
They are.
And we have to show so much compassion and empathy. I don't care how many cases I have on my docket. But especially now, with companies that are closing, people out of work, people not being able to pay rent, people coming in for modifications of child support. This is a difficult, difficult time. And I think as an elected official and as a judge in family court and domestic relations court, we really have to roll up our sleeves and really come up with creative solutions if the case doesn't go to trial. If we do go to trial, then we have to, again, our mantra and our mission is to be fair, just, and equitable under the law. But every family is different and comes to that court with different issues, whether it's substance abuse issues, employment issues, bankruptcy issues. There's just so many different complexities, whether you need, business evaluators or receiverships or whatever there is. Every case that comes before you is different and has a different nuance and a different characteristic. And you have to look under the hood and see where you go.
How big a staff do you have?
So I have 2 magistrates, a trial magistrate, Jesse Canonico, and my post-decree magistrate is Colleen Reale. And there are a number of support magistrates that work for all of the court. And then we have a law department. My staff attorney is Romy, who's excellent. And Linda Devine is my scheduler, and Nancy Newmark is my bailiff. So I'm only as good. Listen, I try to surround myself with people much smarter than me because they make me look good. And these are dedicated public servants, and they really work very, very hard. And especially now with the pandemic, they really on the front end work. So everybody we have a help center that helps pro se litigants or self-represented litigants. What I've seen, which was different in the prosecutor's office, in a criminal case, you have a constitutional right to an attorney, and you are retained or appointed in the arraignment room. These are civil cases, so about 60% of our cases now on one side an individual does not have a lawyer. So we have a help center that was instituted by our court, and we're very proud of it, and we have people working very, very hard. I will say, and I'm proud, I helped develop an app for domestic relations court called Court Connect. And it's one of the first apps that of any domestic relations court in the country that has, and any pro se litigant or any attorney can download that for free, and you can find your case, when your court date is. You're going to get notices anyway, but it helps calendar, especially someone that's a pro se litigant. And it's been very helpful for our families in domestic relations court. So we can work within the structure, but with technology now, and I have to tell you, and I really want to thank a lot of the staff members at Domestic Relations Court, our court administrator, Jim Zak, our administrative judge, Leslie Celebrezzi. They have really focused. We received a grant from the Ohio Supreme Court for technology. I think it's wonderful, and I think our families appreciate it, that for a divorce that's not so complex, or an uncontested divorce or a dissolution, we were doing a lot, the majority of them are through Zoom. So we'll have people that don't have to miss work to come down, they could do it via Zoom with their attorney or if they're self-represented. And it's been working really, really well. So it saves litigants, they don't have to take the vacation day. They don't have to pay for parking. They don't have to take, time off from work. And I think it's the wave of the future, and I think this is where we're moving forward in that way.
So, Ms. Simon, and you mentioned before this is a part-time job. Sounds like it's a very large and time-consuming part-time job. Do you have an office on East 9th Street that you go to?
We have we each have our own individual office that we go to. I have worked there when I go, and we do not have, unlike other, like city councils, we don't have individual staff members. When the new government formed, because we were part-time, it was frowned upon, and so we've really managed with our we have a small staff, a couple staff attorneys, chief of staff, an assistant, and 3 clerks that we've been able to manage. They work really, really hard for us, and so it's working, but we always could use another hand. It's a full-time job, and I wish I could do it full-time, because I love it. It's the best job I've ever had. That, so much opportunity in this county to make a change, to bring back population. We're struggling with loss of population, urban sprawl, so many issues, and poverty in the core that, I wish I had more time. There's only so many hours in a day, but I spend a lot of time there. My law office is downtown, so I shuttle back and forth and do what I need to do. And now that we're on Zoom with our legal hearings, I can spend more time now at the county that it's opened up. But so that's the situation.
First, you, Ms. Simon, on the legislative side, do you face questions about trust in public officials? Do people wonder whether they're getting the full story from your perspective? Have you faced that personally?
There's, I believe, always going to be a group of people who mistrust government. That's a strain that exists, and so absolutely that when I do a lot of interaction with residents, I do a lot of personal attendance at events and knock on doors, and I've absolutely had people just reach out that you're only there for whatever reason, some corrupt, you're all corrupt, or you're all you're doing this for the wrong reason. But overall, my experience has been in the communities that I represent, it's been just really reciprocal in the respect and the trust, and I don't get a lot of that pushback, but absolutely it's there. And I kind of have learned that that's a strain of belief and outlook of residents, that it's always going to be there, and there's only so much I can do to get their trust on levels. And with the legislation I support, and there's I did a lot of work on anti-discrimination, and there's been pushback there from some sections of the community. In South Euclid, we have a heavy Catholic community that was opposed and is opposed. We're getting sued right now at the county for anti-discrimination legislation. So there's been lack of trust on that we're doing it for the wrong reason, that we're coddling just for political gain. So that, I can tell you, is a real life experience. And but again, it's just really moving forward with the core belief and not changing and morphing into something other than who I am and what I believe for justice. And so that pushback's there, and the trust issue comes up even working with my colleagues and the mayors and the different leaders in the community of, you know, I'm going to stand by this no matter what. And sometimes it's regretful. You know, right now I'm in a situation where I committed my word to something, and it's like, you know, I'm going to stick with my word, but at the end of the day, I'm questioning whether that was, you know, the outcome is going to be a good one because of that. So, but no, I'm standing by the word, and that's all I've got.
Good for you. And Judge, I know that during all my years of private practice, and Sonny, I know will agree with me, one of the first questions you get asked is, do you know the judge?
Yep.
Is he or she a nice judge? Is there anything I can do to make your job with that judge easier? Shouldn't we just be really harsh and yell and scream? And I hear about these lawyers who just do things the harsh way, and it seems like they always win. All of these type of comments are made in an area of the law, family law, where there are statutes. There's no emotional side to these issues. There's just statutes. There's law that says, and there's a chart that says you pay this much child support. How do I get out of paying child support? When can I stop paying spousal support? Why am I paying so much? It must be the judge. All of these things that I know Sonny and I know we've dealt with all these years. How do you perceive your role knowing that the public comes in with a lot of preconceived notions about who that person is on the bench?
Well, and that's one of the reasons, Peter, that I meet with the families at the first
Good.
pretrial. I try to know more about them than they probably think I should know about them at the first pretrial. You know, I get a sense for who their family is. I like to say, you know, when I look at a file or I look at the pleadings, I like to know what their children's names are and how old they are and where they go to where they go to school, their children, where they attend school. I like to know, I think it gives you a perspective, but clearly, I mean, you have statutes that you have to follow, and I tend to, you know, set trial dates and then we move backwards. I think families need to know that there's an end date. I don't like to elongate the pain, and that might be the prosecutor in me that likes to, you know, set those trial dates.
Yes.
But I don't like the, you know, I think in the past there was this way where the attorneys would talk to the judge in chambers and they would go out like, you know, shuttle diplomacy, I guess, right? And I don't like that. You know, and again, I'm not meeting with parties every pretrial, but I like them to know this is where we're going. You know, there's a trial order. This is the expectations. If we're going to go to trial, there are discovery issues. You know, there's a, you know, for instance, on a motion to compel, Justice, you know, Donnelly on the Ohio Supreme Court now had kind of a recommendation in common pleas court that there were different protocols you had to go through before ruling on a motion to compel discovery. And that was really engaging with the attorneys with an attorney pretrial conference by phone to not create more litigation fees and more attorney's fees. And I really have that practice in my court. I handle, and this was pre-corona, a lot of attorney telephone conferences. I like to really drill down and figure out what those issues are, to have those issues resolved prior to trial, and if there are remaining issues, we'll try those cases.
Yeah.
But I want the families to know that they're going to really have a seat at the table in my courtroom, and they're going to have a fair trial, that there are certain dates, and that we're going to do things in a very efficient and effective way. I've had actually one of the most successful dockets since I've been on the bench in terms of disposed cases. And, you know, we work really well, my colleagues and I. it's really, you know, in terms of the mission of the court and how do we work with technology to kind of work in a way with families. And you know, now, you know, too, we have to pivot to a certain extent. We, you know, someone that's self-represented, we hold them to the same standards as someone that was, you know, being represented. It's really hard, you know, some people feel, you know, and because of the financial resources that they can't afford a lawyer, or they'll say, I don't need a lawyer. But when you think about it, if someone's working and they have a pension, and they have a family, and they have a mortgage, and they have credit card debt, or they have assets, or whatever they have, I mean, these are complex issues. So the pension issues, where you really need representation. But if they can't afford one or they decide not to have one, we, you know, again, we have to treat them fairly and with compassion. So at the end of the day, people can walk away with a modicum of respect for what they had and for the system, that it's fair and efficient.
And Sonny, Miss Simon, sorry, how do you deal with all these years in the family law practice with the client who says, I want the one who's going to yell the loudest and make the most obnoxious statements I can because I want the judge to know that I'm this kind of person or that kind of person? Have you dealt with that in your years of family law practice?
Of course, Peter, yes.
That
of
wasn't a very good
course.
question, I know, for
yes,
me and you, but how about for the public's eye?
You know, of course, I mean, they see TV maybe, or thinking that's how to get things done, or coming in with unreasonable expectations that, you know, they want something that, with my experience in this court, with this, you know, atmosphere, that I can't get them what they want, you know, whether it's full custody and the other, the husband perhaps not having any contact unless it's under like super intense supervision. And I know that in this case, it's not gonna happen. What do I do? You know, I tell them the truth that, you know, in my experience, I don't think you're gonna reach this goal, and it's not gonna be because I'm screaming the loudest. And I recommend at that point, if they're looking for something else, to, you know, go see another lawyer, because this is how I practice. And I also try to resolve cases, you know, as difficult as it is sometimes, to try to work things out with opposing counsel before going in with a hammer. I'm always ready to fight, as I think Peter knows, and maybe this judge, but I don't come in that way. I always come in, but I think the answer is I'm honest and just say that's not how I operate. That's not perhaps how you're going to reach your goal, and maybe the goal that you want is not even achievable, but I will do everything in my power to get you close.
You know, there's a step when you're a legislator that I have experienced in my law director time. If you're one council person, you never win. If you're 4 councilmen, you always win. And the smart councilman always has 3 friends, because it takes 4 votes to win out of 7.
Yeah.
And that is something I learned very early on, 36 years ago, when I first got involved with law at the municipal level, is that any council person that has 3 good friends can get legislation passed. And there's a way you develop those friendships and you keep them. And you both were legislators, and you both know that not every vote's going to be 7-0. There's got to be some 4-3s. And if you have the attitude of, I'm going to go through there with my elbows out, you're not going to get the 4 votes you need. Let me change the subject again. We're on page 1 of my 3 pages of questions, and the time's running pretty fast here. In the private sector, as I look out at the 5 of us that are here, you always have a boss. You generally have someone who you report to, who may or may not be keeping an eye on what you're doing, but there's always somebody there that you have to report to. Judge Goldberg, do you have a boss that you report to for your professional work?
So I'll share with you. So someone, you know, people ask me, when are you up for re-election again? And I am up in 2022. However, I do say every day's election day. Every day
Gotcha.
I have to earn this. Every day. You know, my employer are the voters, everyone, the families of Cuyahoga County. Everybody in Cuyahoga County. But every day I've got to earn that job. Every day I've got to earn sitting on that bench and wearing that robe and making decisions that impact families.
And how about you,
I take
Sonny?
it very seriously.
The voters of Cuyahoga County, District 11, they're my boss, And in my legal profession, my clients are my boss. And of course, it's my clients and the residents.
In our professional lives, in our public and/or professional lives, there always is a time, whether you're a professor or you're a judge or you're working in any kind of job, someone's going to make a complaint. They're going to say, you know, I don't like the way that professor taught me, or I don't like the way something went. For both of you, Ms. Simon, you can go first. How does that complaint process work, and how do you react when something like that happens?
Well, there's complaints in both of my roles as a legislator and as an attorney, but I can speak to the legislative as just, the complaints are huge if people don't like legislation that I support, and I didn't do this right, or I shouldn't have done it. It's, at first, when I first got into public life, it was very hurtful. I think if we're talking about complaints.
Yes.
It was very hurtful, and I try to make it right. I try to go to these residents in South Yukon and say, well, I did this because of this, and I, droned on and really try to have them believe that their complaint wasn't valid. But at the end of the day, through experience, I learned that their complaint was valid because they have a different outlook of how their communities should be run, and they don't agree with perhaps the things that I support and champion. So I shifted with those complaints and said, okay, I have to respect where that resident is, and it's a complaint that's valid to them, and I have to move on and just continue to do this work and understand that not everybody's going to be happy, and I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm always going to do my best, and I'm always going to be there for the residents and do what I think is right in that context. And it's just, but it's life experience that did that, because I would, just really be miserable with, and even getting attacked. I mean, politically, when I moved up to the county level, it became just really super different than being on a city council with the level of attacks that were coming in all over the place. And I wasn't used to that, but I got a thick skin and learned how to just stay focused and,
Wow.
and let those, arrows come at me, and it's, you have to move through legislation.
And Judge?
I'd have to say it would go to the 8th District Court of Appeals probably, right? Through an appeal process if litigants through their attorneys, or if they're pro se, file an appeal based on my decision. Listen, not everybody's going to be happy. But, listen, when you're doing the research and writing these opinions and hearing the testimony, we want to do what's fair, and again, I'm going to work very hard and very diligently to come up with a decision based on the evidence that comes out in trial that's fair, just, and equitable, whether it's property division, child support, spousal support, or the impact that it has on our children and visitation issues. The first week or two that I started on the bench, I had a couple that they were smiling and giggling and laughing, and I was divorcing them, and I'm like, how can I you're happier than 95% of my married friends. Like, what are we doing here? And so, they were talking about going out to dinner, and I said, can I take a picture with you? I don't think I'll ever have another happily divorced couple. And we, they were laughing, we were, and then it started our wall of happiness. So we've got hundreds, it's a small percentage, but hundreds of pictures of happily divorced couples. But, the bottom line is, and I tell families this at the end of a case, that no matter what, especially if there are children, that you are always going to be a family. And that the court is cautiously optimistic that you will share in many celebrations together, milestone life events, and hopefully that will happen. But, again, it's a contentious, it can be a very contentious process, and I try to take down the temperature. But again, I have to, there's guidelines and deadlines and things of that nature, and some people, some attorneys or individuals aren't going to be happy with that. But, we do it with compassion, and I try to do it with some heart.
So a judicial position, are there any term limits?
There are, so I'm in a 6-year term now, and there's unexpired terms, but you cannot run for a Cuyahoga County judgeship. I think in Ohio, actually, you cannot run when you're 70 years old. Like if the election takes place and you're 68 or 69, you can run and go beyond that for the 6-year term. But if you are 70, in November at that election, you cannot run.
And how about it at your position on council? Is there an age limit?
No age limits, residency, but also no term limits at our level.
And when we think about, I have personal experience, I'm sure the two of you have some personal experience, we do see people who might just have remained in their position a little too long. Is there an obligation for either of you, if you come upon someone who maybe isn't doing either your level of work or seriously isn't able to do their job anymore, is there something, first of all, have you experienced that, either of you, and what can you do about it?
I have not experienced in the position of a council person at the city level or at the county, that, especially at the county, that my colleagues on the county council, and the majority of us have been there from the beginning. We, at least so far, have brought a bipartisan way to govern, and we're very close, even though some of us are on opposite sides of the political spectrum. And we came into the job with a commitment to do what was right for this county, and we never let, very aggressively involved in creating the rules. We came in with nothing. I mean, Peter, we didn't have, when are we gonna meet for council? There was nothing. It was a blank slate.
Wow.
We had to come together to develop rules of council and how to operate and everything. It was amazing to be there. But what that did was create a work ethic and a level of commitment to the county that I've never seen before. It might change, and I worry about that down the road, that people might come in that don't understand or know about the bipartisan operation that we created. It's not, I hope it stays, but if I were to see somebody as a colleague that didn't work as hard as somebody else, it's, they have a separate district and they have voters, and maybe at that point there's a discussion about that, but so far I haven't had that.
So Judge, maybe I should rephrase the question slightly. When, in your years on the bench, have you yet come across an attorney who you thought violated the ethical rules that all lawyers have to abide by?
I have not.
Wow.
I have not. And I think that speaks volumes for domestic relations court attorneys. I've been really impressed. And listen, they've made me, the attorneys in domestic have really made me a better judge. You start out, you're really kind of, you're in the trenches, you're rolling up your sleeves, you're working hard, but, each case is a little bit different, and you learn from the domestic relations bar, and I think as a judge you have to continue to learn. That's the only way you get better.
And where do you go when you need legal advice as to how to rule on something? Where can you go for that advice?
Well, I mean, you're looking at case law. I speak to my magistrates in terms of the cases, and I do a lot of research. And I look at prior cases and see certain fact patterns and where the Ohio Supreme Court and where our Court of Appeals is looking for precedent. And so I roundtable, also with a number of the magistrates in the court.
And how about you, Ms. Simon? Is there a place where a legislator can go for legal help?
Well, legal help, absolutely. We have staff. We have attorneys on staff.
Okay.
In a law department that we lean on. But the question, I think, if you rephrase it, anything unethical occurring, has that occurred? Yes. And we installed an inspector general at the county government, which wasn't there before. So we have a whole department to investigate complaints if there's something not looking above board. So we've got that tool.
So there's an interesting word in the law called recusal, where you say, "Oh, I can't put my hands on that," for a variety of reasons. I'm just going to suggest in the issue with being a divorce judge, it's my next door neighbor's case. How frequently do you get into the issues where I think, boy, maybe I shouldn't rule on this because he's my fourth cousin's brother-in-law, or because it is my next door neighbor? Have you had those issues come up, and what do you do about it?
I have. And it's interesting, listen, you're on city council in a community. You meet a lot of different people. You run countywide. I've run countywide 3 times. You meet a lot of people from a lot of different sectors of our community, which I absolutely love meeting new people. But names come up, and then sometimes people will try to reach out to the court to try to talk to you, or you'll be somewhere and they'll say, "Hey, you've got my case." And I'm like, "Okay, just so you know, I'm gonna have to recuse myself," And you know that. I mean, if there's that relationship, whether it's family or someone that goes to your synagogue or someone that was in your, went to school with you through high school or whatever it is. And listen, judges, just like any elected official, judges are human. And we bring life experience, and, I have 4 kids, and my husband has, his family, and our sister, our extended families, and people. And you just immediately, there's that mechanism to be able to recuse yourself.
How about you, Ms. Simon? Has there been a vote that you thought I better step out of the room and not be a part of?
Potentially, but what I see the conflicts more readily would be as my job is my role as an attorney.
Go ahead.
When I have a resident of two
Oh,
residents
my
of
gosh.
a community that I represent, and I know both. So that comes up more than a vote on council. Is just because I'm so involved with the community that, one party comes to me because they know me, and then, I know the other side of that. So I've got to step aside from
So
that.
before we conclude, I always write down a last question. It's kind of a softball question, but I think it's important for everybody listening to hear your answer to that. And it's really something that maybe because the 3 of us have been around the block a few times, maybe you have thought about. And the question is, how do you create your professional legacy? Not something that they're going to read about, but how do we create a profile and a legacy that you can be proud of? How is that done? It's because we have a legislator and a judicial person. Is it different? So we'll start with you, Ms. Simon, if you want to go first. How do you create a professional legacy that people could look back on and say, boy, Ms. Simon, she was everything you've talked about tonight?
To live in integrity and to always really follow my passion as a legislator, first of all. I mean, we can look at legislation legacy. What did she do? How did, her role as a legislator impact the community? And that's easier, I think, than, I think when we talked about Justice Ginsburg, how was her legacy with regard to the colleagues and the community, and I think it's integrity. And I think for me is to just continue to work hard and develop legislation that I think is important to the community and around especially environmental issues that, are crucial right now. And I'm doing everything I can to make a difference there. And I hope someday there'll be a legacy about, yep, she did this. But more importantly, how did I represent the community, and how was my relationship to the residents, to the voters, to the mayors, to the city council people? Did I represent them well, but was I a friend, and was I a colleague? Was I somebody could come to me to help them? And I think that's the bottom line, is to be there with compassion and readiness to be a friend and a listener.
Thank you. Judge?
So, Peter, I'm going to quote the late poet, writer Maya Angelou, who I absolutely love. And she said, "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel." And whether that's, on the bench or on county council, did I show compassion? Did I show empathy? Was I fair? Was I just? Did I display the kind of compassion for their family, not only for the short term, but for the long term? Did I inspire young people to go to law school? Did I have the kind of moral code, ethical code? Listen, your integrity is not for sale. How did I work with my colleagues? What does the bar say about me? I'm talking about the legal bar. How did they, was I fair? Did I listen? Did I work hard? Did I show gratitude? And, was I a good mother? Was I, was I a good wife? Have I displayed an example? Not just when you're wearing the robe, but when no one's really watching, when you go home and you do think about some of these cases and are these families going to be better? Are they going to be better from this point forward? Did I show enough appreciation and gratitude for the work that we're doing to try to make a difference?
Well, I hope everybody has enjoyed this, from my perspective, extraordinary conversation. These are special people here that have offered their time after working hard. I'm sure both of them today. We try to bring to the forefront people who are leaders. I mean, you saw the legislative side of Ms. Simon, who I've known for a long time, and I've learned quite a bit. And I'm just proud of the work you do.
Thank you.
You're to be commended for your commitment, full-time lawyer, and the rest of the time being a legislator. And Judge Goldberg, who I've learned a lot about before, and earlier this year and now, I mean, these are the tops of our profession. We all happen to be lawyers, which we all agree is a great profession. But when you're a lawyer, the easiest thing I can tell you is you're never not a lawyer. You always think like a lawyer. You always pretend that you want to be something else. But in the end, we are lawyers first. And any chance we can get to make our profession better helps everybody else. And I just think how much I hope everybody has learned about you two wonderful women, wonderful Jewish women in our local community, and we have a lot to be grateful for. As always, I thank Louise Fernandez and Deb Gerard, who are behind the camera making this real, and we look forward to seeing everybody next month. Thank you very much.